Good evening and welcome to the KVUE Digital Transportation Town Hall. In 2018, transportation analysis firm INRIX deemed Austin the 14th most congested city in the country, something many of us who live here know all too well. So for the next hour, we're asking the questions you want answered about traffic and what's next for Austin. Just leave a comment in this video if you're watching on Facebook, or you can tweet us using the hashtag Boomtown2040. I'm Ashley Goodo, and tonight's town hall is part of our year-long Boomtown 2040 initiative, taking a deep dive into the issues created by Austin's rapid growth. Sitting at our roundtable tonight is Randy Clark, President and CEO of Capital Metro, Dr. Cara Kockelman, a traffic engineer and professor at the University of Texas, Brian Barth, Director of Project Planning and Development for TxDOT, Mike Heilengastine, Executive Director of the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, and Delia Garza, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Austin. Thank you all for being here today. Mike, I'm sure I mispronounced your name. Please forgive me.
Not a problem.
All right. So, Noah, I just gave you everyone's title. We want to give each of our guests a minute to go around and tell us what they are at their organizations and what their organizations actually do. And so we will start with Mr. Clark.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me tonight, and appreciate the great panel and a very important topic. So I have the opportunity to be the President and CEO of Capital Metro. We have 1,800 men and women that serve our region, deliver public transportation service. So a lot of people know us as the Metro Rail, our Metro Rapid service, and all of our fixed bus service. We serve not just Austin, but the region, and we also do Metro Access, which is our paratransit service, which is ADA compliant service around the region as well. So we move almost a better part of 100,000 people a day, and obviously do a lot of special events and all that type of thing as well. So thanks again for having me here tonight.
Of course, Dr. Carr.
Hi, I've been here 21 years as a professor of transportation engineering in the Department of Civil, Architectural, Environmental Engineering at UT, and I educate your kids and hopefully their kids. Have a lot of fun doing it, but also investigate a lot of important topics for the state and for communities all over the place in the area of congestion and crashes and emissions and now self-driving vehicles and ride sharing and congestion pricing, those kinds of things. So our graduate students do a lot of hard work to try to answer those questions for society.
Brian.
So we're the Texas Department of Transportation. We're responsible for the design, construction, operations, and maintenance of the state system roadway across the state. That's over 196,000 lane miles across the state. We've got just over 12,000 employees across the state performing those functions, and we're challenged with the growth of this state, and we're looking for solutions to deliver transportation all over the state.
Mike.
Hi. Again, thank you for having us. Executive Director of the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. We were formed in 2002 and began operation really at the end of 2003. We have a broad statutory authority, anything I call it trails to rails. We can do anything between those 2 points, including airports, roads, paths, whatever. And what we found pretty quickly was that people were looking for more capacity in the roadway system, and that one of the things that focusing on that did was it also provided us a financial foundation for moving forward. So in the short time we opened our first road in 2007, and we've added about $2 billion worth of new capacity into the metro system, and we have about another $2 billion on the planning time frame. So we are a adjutant to TxDOT. They are our founding agency in a lot of ways, so we look forward to continuing to improve capacity in Central Texas.
And Mayor Pro Tem, what about the city's role in transportation?
Sure. So I have the honor and privilege to serve on the Austin City Council. We are the 11th largest city in the country. I feel like when I give that statistic to people, they are often very surprised. You know, there'll be times when I'll say we are the 11th largest city, and they'll say in Texas, right? And I'll say no, actually, you know, in the country. Mm-hmm. We face significant challenges because we're growing so fast. We're one of the fastest growing cities. We're projected to double in population every 20 years. You know, I think for a long time, many Austinites wanted to remain the sleepy college town that we had been for a very long time. And I feel because we had probably not planned for the growth that we were expecting in the past, we are faced with so many challenges, and wanting to ensure that we have a multimodal system and give options to our Austinites. And also, we're administering a $720 million bond. The voters invested significantly to help with our sidewalk infrastructure, our road infrastructure, our urban trails, our bicycle lanes. So we are, we handle everything in the city, and I also have the privilege to also actually serve on the Capital Metro Board as the vice chair. So I wear the hat of a City of Austin elected official as well as on the Capital Metro Board. I think a lot of times people think that they are the same entity,
right?
But they are in fact not. But they are an important partner in helping us get to a mode shift, to get people hopefully out of their vehicles, because we're not going to solve our congestion issues if we just remain one person getting in one vehicle trying to get to wherever we need to go.
And that's something we're going to hear a lot tonight about one person, one vehicle. I think a key factor in addressing Austin's mobility challenges is understanding how we got here. During our first Boomtown Live documentary way back in 2017, we talked to former Austin Mayor Will Wynn about the lack of transportation infrastructure. He told us some of the problem stems from a lack of state funding. Take a listen.
Austin didn't get its, sort of fair share of, say, major road infrastructure dollars. Austin's about 6% of the state's population. There clearly were a couple of decades we weren't getting 6% of the multi-billion dollars worth of, new road starts, for instance. And even if you're opposed to new roads, well, how about the red lights on Ed Bluestein or 360, or until recently going out to our airport, right? So it's not necessarily building new roads, we just missed the chance to even improve what we had.
So Mayor Pro Tem, we want to give you a moment to kind of weigh in on all of this from the city's perspective about the lack of funding Austin got from the state.
I think Texas can do better in a lot of different ways, and I think that one of those is in the funding that is provided. We've seen in other parts of our country how there has been significant investment because it's so necessary. I think we Texans are very proud of many things, and one of those is we love getting in our cars and our pickups and driving the open road, but we've switched to, in many situations, in ours especially, an urban setting, and in that urban setting we cannot just be that one person in the vehicle, and so it has become in many ways a city's responsibility to find the funding to provide for our public transit, to provide the completing the sidewalk infrastructure. And as Austinites, we also want to grow in a very sustainable way, and so road infrastructure, the necessary more funding is definitely needed, but we also need to do it in a sustainable way and know that we cannot continue. There has been no example of a city building its way out of congestion, and that there's so many negative effects of just continuing to build roads and continuing to build roads. So on one hand, yes, we need better funding. On the other, we need to grow in a very sustainable way and change the way we do things here in Austin.
So talk to us a little bit about, from the city's standpoint, what's happening right now to address our region's projected growth.
So the $720 million bond was one step in the direction, and that was sticker shock to a lot of people. Frankly, to some council members, we were like, $720 million. But when you look how other cities have learned to invest in their cities, Seattle, I believe, passed a $64 billion. It's in the billions. LA just recently passed billions of dollars in funding. We don't fund our transportation infrastructure the way that other parts of our region do, and so it's been the city's responsibility to complete the sidewalk infrastructure, to complete the road infrastructure, to try to find ways to get out of this congestion. Another thing is we have environmentally protected areas that prohibit us from building additional roadways in our right of way. So we have a lot of challenges, but I think Austinites, we're finally at this tipping point, and Town Hall's a perfect example of that, how these issues are being highlighted, and we're at this tipping point where we have to do something, whether it's more funding from our partners, and I'm so grateful for all the partners that are here with us today. We have to work together, and we have to figure this out together. to solve this issue, because it is really at this tipping point where people are just frustrated and they're asking for solutions.
Right, so let's keep talking about that funding and that money, because funding transportation construction is an issue all in of itself. So according to the Texas Comptroller's Office, most road funding comes from taxes, some from general sales tax and levies, but the bulk of it comes from the gas tax. Here's how that money is split. Every time you fill up your tank, 38 cents of what you pay per gallon is taxes. 18 cents of that goes to the federal government and is used for highway and mass transit projects, state grants, and programs approved by Congress. 20 cents of the tax stays in Texas, but it's not all used on roads. 5 cents of it goes to schools. The other 15 cents goes to the state highway fund. But the comptroller explains that the gas tax money and registration fees that you pay just make up about half of the state highway fund. That other half comes from the federal government. So it's important to remember also that back in 2014, Texas voters did approve a proposition to allow some money be diverted from the rainy day fund to help pay for transportation. Still, it seems like our state always needs more money. So Brian, this is where we come to you. TxDOT, talk to us about the funding challenges that you guys and your entity is facing.
So you mentioned the Proposition 1, or the money that's transferred from the rainy day fund to transportation. The other thing that the legislature did and voters voted on was Proposition 7, which transfers some sales tax and then later some vehicle sales tax to the transportation fund to build transportation. So in August of 2018, our TxDOT, our Transportation Commission approved the largest unified transportation program in our history, which is a 10-year program to deliver $75 billion worth of projects across the state. Again, that's a 10-year program, but it is the most that we've ever done before, and it's because of the legislature and the voters that approved those two propositions. We've got transportation programs across the state to deliver. Our number one goal is safety. We've got to address safety across the state. But another big initiative of ours is the Texas Clear Lanes Initiative, and that's to address congestion in the 5 large metropolitan areas across the state, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston, and of course Austin. And so we've seen some big projects get developed or are on the drawing boards to deliver in the next few years as a result of that Texas Clear Lanes program.
Sometimes what we hear when it comes to TxDOT is so much of the money that you all get has to go to maintaining the roads. I mean, it's not just building new roads, it's maintaining the current roads and bridges that we already have. How much money does that take?
Well, it takes a good portion of our funding. In fact, probably without Proposition 1 and Proposition 7, most of our funding would be towards preservation and maintaining our current assets, because the quickest way to not deliver on our transportation mission is to let our existing infrastructure crumble.
Mm-hmm. But there's also delays too. You guys approve a project, and hopefully it's one cost whenever you approve it, but sometimes it takes a little while for construction to get underway. Like when we look at the 183 toll road, what's happening north of Cedar Park in that area. Sometimes it takes a while to get these things done, right?
It is a challenge to get these projects done, and there's a lot of hoops we've got to jump through to get environmental clearance, which is very important, especially in this area. But we've got to get through those processes. The quickest way to save money on the project is to finish, and we're focused on that. We're focused on executing our program across the state and getting these roadways open as quick as possible.
Yeah. So for our viewers, we want to be clear and hear from the other folks on our panel about their funding challenges. So Randy, explain to us how Cat Metro gets its money and where you guys are seeing challenges.
Yeah, there's no question. So if we think the roadway system in Texas has funding challenges, the mass transit or public transportation system is much more significant. So we get most of our funding from a 1 cent sales tax in our service area. It makes up a majority of our budget. We also have some federal funds that we get through grants, and they both discretionary and competitive grants on the federal side. And then there's a few other little pieces, advertising and some other stuff we do, but mostly driven through the penny sales tax. As Delia mentioned, one of the challenges is that from the state side, the funding is driven, and I guess constitutionally, to roads. And so most of our peer competitive states that we track for economic development, the states actually put a lot of funding into public transportation just like they put into roads. And we don't have that current situation. So if 97% of our money keeps going into roads, then we obviously don't have the funding for that. So we are going to be challenged that way, and I think she articulated very well that leaves it really to localities to figure out how to fill these deltas. And just like highways, public transportation is incredibly expensive to do the infrastructure, and obviously then you have long-term operations and maintenance as well.
Yeah. What about you guys at the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority? I'm just going to start saying the acronym from now on, Mike. How about you guys? How do you get your money, and what are the challenges for you?
Well, we get our money from the folks that use our facilities. We are like municipal utilities. Water is self-sustainable, sewer, and so forth. So, what we need to do is see our roadway system more as a utility moving forward, meaning that it needs to be able to pay for itself. Our latest project that we've done, are going to do, is 183 North, which is going to be adding 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, plus non-toll in partnership with the department. That's all paid for by the user fees. There's no tax money involved. I don't need to go back to any tax base to beg for money anymore. We've gotten our system strong enough now to where we can build these projects. Mopac South is another $500 million project. We don't need any tax dollars for that. So it's incredibly important to develop a system, a utility system or a roadway system that can support itself, and we've been able to do that in Central Texas. And the Mopac managed lanes, which the Capital Metro has seen an incredible increase. One of the things I wouldn't say I disagree with my panelists here, but the biggest increase in the Capital Metro system has been because of a new road.
And you would say that's because, again, Cap Metro gets to ride that toll lane
at no cost, and they get to move their people at 60 miles an hour. I was watching a bus go through it the other day, an express bus, and it was leading the pack. It was, we were concerned for a while of slowing down the traffic, but not anymore. Your drivers have been well trained. They know what they're doing, and they get their people from the far northern areas of the area to downtown in 12, 13 minutes.
And one of the things we want to point out is while some people feel, some type of way, we'll say, about toll roads, because you don't need tax dollars, this is why a lot of times we see municipalities leaning towards toll roads, right?
Well, it's happening all over the country. I mean, and I think the Mayor Pro Tem brought up too, we got to make our roadways smarter. And even Environmental Defense has seen the importance of managed lanes, where you can actually price it for congestion, and that has a big implication for being able to manage particularly your peak hours. Austin and most of the southern cities throughout the United States are driven by peak hours. You can go out on most other times of the day and you can drive 60 miles an hour wherever. Our peak hours are our nemesis, and that's what we're really fighting. We've got to work to move shift hours to get people out of their cars, single occupancy cars. We know that we have 900,000 empty seats coming in and out of Austin every day in people's cars. And I think going forward, one of the things we're going to see with ride sharing is people are going to start selling those seats.
Interesting to see if that happened. And so then it begs the question, and I'm just going to go off script a little bit. One of the things that we see in different cities, we see in Dallas and Houston, is HOV lanes, and people have the opportunity to ride the toll roads for free if they have a certain number of people in their car. Is that on the table for Austin?
No.
Flat out.
No.
Flat out.
HOV lanes that is an old school attempt at a solution. You can go to Houston and ride that Katy Freeway on the HOV lane. There will be one car every quarter mile. That is an incredible waste of infrastructure. Where you have the HOT, where you have the high occupancy toll, they're moving much more dense, much more user. Most of the HOV lanes throughout the United States have been transformed to HOT because of it's just, you're not going to get 3 people in a car very often, and you don't want to waste that. I'd rather have 60 people in a bus than try and sell HOV in Austin.
But in Houston, they do both. You can ride it and you can pay, or if you happen to have enough people in your car, it's free.
Right, and you can do that, but you can't pay your debt back with that. I did the numbers before we did the MOPAC managed lanes, and if you did HOV 3 or 2, even a 3, you would not have been able to pay back the $230 million that were borrowed.
You know we're coming to you, but I know you want to come in. Go ahead, Dr. Kara, go ahead.
I should say that it's incredibly difficult to enforce high occupancy. I would never want to spend my money that way on police officers sitting there trying to read through a very dark window now. And the way that they manufacture our glass, it's very hard to see inside these vehicles. Even infrared and other technologies can't tell whether that live being is a dog or a human. So, and it really doesn't spur additional people in your vehicle, because those are usually kids or other people who'd be riding with you anyhow. It's usually household members. It takes a very specific setting where you can actually change behavior with an HOV.
Interesting. All right. Well, Doug, we want to get to you. Talk to us a little bit about the city's greatest funding challenges. I know I can think of a few for you, and how are those going?
So the city, the money revenue that the city gets is either property taxes, which is possibly going to be capped this legislative session, our ability to bring in revenue. Sales tax, which is capped. We cannot, the Constitution does not allow us to go above where we are right now. And the other way is through our bonding capacity, which is required that we go out to the voters to ask for approval. I think we've been very lucky to have voters who understand the challenges that we face. In fact, passed a $925 million bond that was for affordable housing and health centers and very needed services in our community. But our capital infrastructure is limited to our ability to bond, and so those are the challenges that we face. And even with our property tax dollars, almost 70% of that goes to public safety. And so that just leaves a little bit left over for all the other things that, our parks, our pools, and there is the possibility that we will be capped at how much revenue that we can, we can bring in, how much we can spend. And so it's because of those limitations, we are, I feel like in a lot of ways we're kind of just waiting to see what happens at the end of this legislative session. I know there has been discussions on whether the 3.5 cap that's being discussed right now will include our bonding capacity and how that could affect our ability to go to the voters for other things. One of the Cap Metro's challenges is that they can't go out to the voters for bonding. They have to come to the city for that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in a way is a good thing. I think that it's good to have your elected officials being part of that discussion and knowing the challenges that each district faces, and knowing the issues, and being able to go out to your district and say, look, we have limited ability to bring in funding, and it's going to take voter-approved bonds to continue to invest in our multimodal system.
So you brought up Senate Bill 2, which is talking about that rollback rate, decreasing. That some people call it a cap, some people say decreasing. And so, if you're not, our viewers, if you're not familiar with it, this would decrease the percentage that cities and counties can increase your property taxes without voter approval, taking it from the 8% that it is now to the 3.5%. The senators and the representatives are hashing out the differences between the two bills now. However, there is a feeling in the legislature that a lot of people want to see this passed, that it could be passed, and supporters say, it's 3.5, but you can always ask for more. You can always go to the voters and ask for more. What do you see as the issue with always having to go ask for more?
Well, it's hard to plan in a lot of ways. Our budgets, we have to look forward years to the things that we're going to have to invest in. And just like a family's budget, costs go up. Even without adding a single new program, a single new anything, our costs go up. Health insurance rates go up. We provide health insurance for our employees. And so in order to just even provide the same level of services that we're providing now, and even many voters don't even think that that's enough. I hear every day about how are you addressing our homeless population? What are you doing to solve traffic congestion? What are you doing for the affordability issue? And it's so within the limitations that we have now, we're not even able to address all of these issues. And so at a 3.5 cap, there will be there will be significant cuts, and it will be across the board, and it could be public safety, it could be people losing their jobs at the city, and so it's a very big concern that caps there. Yes, we can definitely go to the voters, and I do believe that at some point if we had to do that, if that's what we had to do, our voters would approve possibly a higher higher rollback, or the higher rate. But it's just we have to plan ahead. We're elected to make those really tough decisions. I feel like the legislature is wanting to micromanage our ability to budget and saying that it is providing property tax relief, when in fact will provide very little relief, because only about 20% of your tax bill is the city of Austin. And I think most people have not looked at their property tax bill to see that it will have a minimal impact on property tax relief.
It's a whole other conversation we could talk about.
Yes.
Spend all day talking about that. So we want to let Cara, we want you to weigh in, because you study this and you look at what other cities and states do. How are they handling funding their transportation? Are they doing it the same way Texas is?
No, a lot of the more progressive, educated states, Austin's an incredibly educated area, but the state of Texas itself is not. And so they raise their state gas taxes. They have the courage to do that, and we have not had that in more than 25 years, which is incredibly embarrassing. And so we're all paying less than 2 cents a mile to drive our cars. Unless you're driving a boat, like a big truck and low fuel economy, you're paying less than 2 cents a mile. And Texas can't survive on that. That's why most of their budget goes to maintenance. We really should be bringing that up to about $1 per gallon, and that's not even going to reflect the climate costs and other things that come from burning that fuel and the military costs of having ourselves in the Middle East. But it will definitely make people choose smaller vehicles, which fit much better on our facilities and take much less screen time at our signalized intersections and get us across those bridges faster. They're also much better in a crash. And the large vehicles a lot of Texans like to drive are really limiting our sight distances. They're requiring much bigger gaps between vehicles to be able to maneuver properly. So I think getting the vehicle sizes down with getting that gas tax up, we've got a couple more days in the legislature. They really should have this down. They also, of course, should be properly assessing properties around the state. Our county does a great job. Travis County has won awards assessing taxes, but not the other counties in this state. And they are letting commercial businesses and their attorneys talk them down. So they're just not raising enough money for schools or their own services. And that really needs to change. So
it's funny you say raise the taxes. The sales tax swap, they were talking about raising the sales tax by 1 cent, and it was adamantly shot down.
Yeah, no, it's not the percentage. It's that they're undervaluing the properties, especially the commercial properties where they have good attorneys to lawyer up with.
Oh, yes, on property taxes. But I'm talking about, you say we should raise the gas tax. The idea of raising the sales tax even by 1 cent was so adamantly shot down. It's just unlikely.
Well, if you explain it to them that they're paying less than 2 cents a mile, because their vehicles just to own and insure cost, on the order of 60 to 90 cents a mile. So gas is really nothing. The only reason people pay attention to it is because when you drive places, you see it on a billboard as you pass a gas station. It's not a real cost for most people.
Interesting. So we want to let some of our viewers ask some of their questions. So we're going to send things over to Rebecca Trejo. Rebecca, what do people want to ask our panelists?
Well, Ashley, thank you, and thank you for our viewers tuning in tonight and sending in your questions. My first question here is for CTRMA's Executive Director, Mike Heiligenstein. I have a question here from Karen Myers-Rogers, and she wants to know, why can't they, transportation leaders, reduce the cost of the tolls? Why can't the toll costs go down? Well,
the primary answer is debt. I mean, when we go out to build a $500 million road, or any municipal service that goes out and borrows $500 million to improve its system, like the city of Austin did on a water plant, you got to pay that back. And we run numbers constantly to see what those rates would have to be to pay that back. So the rates that we charge our customers are based upon the maintenance of the facility, the debt payments, those types of things that it would take to continue to operate that facility, including the debt. So you can pay it either in your taxes by taking that $2 billion I talked about earlier and moving it over to the tax side, or you can leave it where it is and the users pay for it. I think what most people have voted for is to let's see the users pay for actually what they're using, so that those folks that never get on a toll road never have to pay.
So then I just want to add into that a little bit, because obviously we have variable pricing when it comes to the toll roads here, depending on when you're driving is the price that they are. As we see more toll roads open in Austin, do you think those prices are going to perhaps go down for drivers?
One thing I would like to say is 45% of the roads we build are non-tolled. Most people don't realize that. When we finish 183 South, 12 lanes, 6 will be tolled, 6 will be non-tolled. So you have a choice. It's up to you what you want to use. As the tolls, I mean, it's debt driven. It's not a matter of the density of the roads or how many you've got on the ground. We got to make our roads smarter, and one of the ways to do that is through the dynamic pricing that we've done that has been so successful for us and for Capital Metro. And that's dynamically priced to how many people want to get on the road. I'm sure Carla could tell us, people don't understand the cost of getting on a road. It's not something in a system that we've had for the last 100 years that people calculate. They just get on the road whenever they want to, and it's not a cost calculation in their minds. With the managed lanes, it is a cost calculation, because now you may want to avoid peak hours. You may go to work at a different time in the morning or come home at a different time at night just to avoid those peak hours, which spreads out and moves people away from the peak, which is, again, I said earlier, that is our nemesis, the peak hour, the rush hour that we have.
So that 45% of the roads that you build that aren't tolled, are those new roads, new lanes, or are they just kind of replacing some of the existing lanes?
They are upgrading, replacing, and moving the old roads. So like on 183 South, there were 4 roads interrupted by the intersections. Now we'll have, that were non-tolled, and now we'll have 6 lanes that will have intersections. They'll be for local traffic, so people in that area won't have to get on that toll road and pay the $1 or $2 that it would take to drive it.
All right, let's head back over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Ashley. And for Delia Garza, here's one for you. Why are bike lanes being added instead of widening car lanes? This is a question that I get all the time reporting on transportation projects all across Austin. So why is that the city tends to expand bike lanes and, not add car lanes?
Sure. So we have limited right-of-way, and so I think there are instances where you probably don't have the right-of-way to add another lane, but it's a road where you could add a bike lane. And this goes to the city's goal of a 50-50 mode share. Right now, I think we're at about 74% of people get in their cars by themselves, single occupancy vehicles. As a part of our Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, we're hoping to change that by 2039. It's a very big goal, but part of that is providing the infrastructure. I hear from constituents that, I'm not going to get in a bike lane that's right next to a car lane. They're afraid for it, and we have like this chicken and egg issue here. So the hope is if we provide these lanes, protected bike lanes, hopefully, people will take that option, will use that mode. I think it's important for us to provide the different kinds of infrastructure. While not every single person will choose to ride a bike, there will be people that choose to ride a bike because they have a bike lane now. Not every person and I'm sure this will be a question soon, will choose to get on a scooter, but that provides a mode of transportation. Not every person will choose to get in a bus, but we have to have options. You have to have different options for different people, and bike lanes are a way that some people will get in there if there's a protected bike lane, and so it's important for us to invest in that.
If I could add to that, and just, people are going to say, hey, the road warrior, right, guy? But we probably have the most aggressive shared use path operation in the region right now. When we went into our first project, 183A up to Cedar Park, and now Leander, we made the decision as an agency to provide a separated shared use path for both walkers, hikers, bikers, and that facility is now 11 miles long. We're doing the same thing at 183 South. We have enough bike and pedestrian facility in that to go to Round Rock. if you wanted to. And the same thing on 45 Southwest, the extension of the Violet Crown Trail. All of those, every project that we've done, with the exception of MOPAC, because of obvious situations, as the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned with the restricted right-of-way, every project that we do has a shared use path separated from the facility for safety. And we look forward to, particularly 183 South, providing the ability to move in that corridor without driving a car.
And are people using them?
Yes, they are. And it actually is gratifying to see that. Sometimes it's a slow build, but once people realize the benefits of it and that they can actually get places, it's very, right now you could go from Manor to the Austin airport on a bike on our roads, between 290 East and 183 South. You'd never have to drive.
If I could just add one other thing about bike lanes is they also help slow down traffic in some cases. When you have, and it doesn't seem like a logical conclusion, but when you reduce the amount of space that a car can travel in, cars naturally slow down. So for example, there was some bike lanes that were put up in my district that became a little bit controversial because they took away where people could park to access a nearby park, and they put bike lanes there instead, and so people were having to park across the street and concerned about that. And I pass this area in the morning every morning, and I'm so proud when I see people, bicyclists in the bike lane, using the bike lanes. I want to stop and take pictures and say, see, they're getting used. People are using them. If we provide these protected lanes, I saw a little boy, he was so cute, he has a little helmet on, he was in his bike lane. We have to provide the safety, and it's safety for the bike riders, it's safety for the school lane and the school zone, it's safety for the vehicles. Vehicles naturally slow down when we have when we have well-designed streets.
All right, Rebecca.
Yes, and one more question from viewers. This is for Randy Clark. Reggie Deal is wondering why it takes Cap Metro, or he is blind and he takes Cap Metro and carts to work, and he wants to know if there are any plans for carts between now and 2040, and carts is the service that services people in rural areas.
Yeah, well, thanks, Reggie, for being a customer. And we always say customer. That's an important thing, because I think I just keep following Delia's lead here because she's saying, not just because she's my board member, but it is about choices, and I really try to treat everyone like a customer, not that they have to take our service. So thank you for that. We do a lot of work in coordination with CARTS. So again, this example is a table full of partners, and CARTS is a very important one. One thing that we're doing really well with CARTS right at the moment is working, it's a TxDOT piece of property in the city of Austin down just kind of off one of your ramps down on Cesar Chavez and Shady Lane area, a new transit center being built. And I got to give a lot of credit to CARTS. They came up with a lot of funding to put that together, and we're putting in funding, and it's a really good partnership to help build a better terminal in the city for a lot of CARTS service to get there and then match up with all of our service so we can have more of a regional integrated model. So I think that's Reggie's point. How do multiple agencies always work together and think about the customers we're serving versus the jurisdictions and our specific governance and finance models? Because at the end of the day, it's about people, and our job is to move people, not worry about necessarily lines that have been put on a map.
All right. That's it for our viewer questions for right now. So we want to say thank you to Rebecca and thank you guys for answering those. We want to circle back to funding for a little bit and the future of Austin's transportation system, right? Because that is so important. We asked Austin State Representative Celia Israel how much money the state needs. Here's her answer.
Need billions. It's a big dollar figure, but it doesn't mean you have to take it all at one swipe. But it does mean we need to plan for it so that in segments we are doing things like our project, fulfilling our Project Connect. That's our map, that's our vision. A better I-35 that has assets on it for the truck traffic that's going through our town, and as well as our pedestrian and bike systems that are safer. Safety is a big component of this, as well as environmental concerns. And the reality is that those who are making automobiles or microbuses or whatever that, scooters, whatever those are, the future is electric. So we've got to work on a future and a purse that is not reliant upon the gasoline engine.
And Cara is shaking her head yes. What do you want to add to that?
Well, we were talking earlier about tolls, and really, again, the legislature does not allow us to toll existing capacity, and that's where all the bottlenecks are. It's not on these new facilities that RMA is providing. It's on our existing, really right-of-way constrained bridges. Those are very expensive to build. They cost about 10 times as much as building a highway at grade. And those are causing all sorts of ripple effects around them. If we just tolled at the bridge crossings, you'd see much more efficient transportation around the system. But we are not permitted yet.
Well, surely you would understand that the people of Texas would be upset that their tax dollars were used to build something, and now something that in their minds, and Brian, please weigh in, something in their minds that's already paid for is now being tolled. It's an unpopular idea.
Well, and it is a challenge today, but Carr is right. The legislature is not allowing us to toll existing roadways. We're not focused on any additional tolled lanes. We're focused on delivering what the legislature has put in front of us, and so we're focused on Prop 1 and Prop 7 and delivering the program across the state based on that funding. If you really want to talk about funding, let's talk about, you mentioned the federal gas tax earlier. So we send money to the federal government, every day when we buy a gallon of gas, and we don't get all that back in projects, and that shortfall amounts to could amount to $940 million in 2019. And so if we just got back what we paid in to the Federal Highway Fund, we could deliver $940 million more projects in 2019.
Well, I should jump in on that. So there's a reason other states actually get more out of the Highway Trust Fund, though, because they're do transit projects. And they get billions of dollars out of the Federal Transit Administration. And so since we don't have local match out of our state to do public transit, like a California or New York or Washington State or Oregon or Colorado, it's very hard for us to get the other part of the Federal Highway Trust Fund, which is, so we're thinking about it again, I respectfully say, the highway. But if we played more in the transit space, we would also be able to take from that side of the ledger too and change that deficit a bit. So it's a multifaceted approach with the feds. It's not one and one only.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about the future and what's coming down the pipeline, because you mentioned we need matching funds. And in order for Cap Metro to get those matching funds, we got to have a bond.
That's right.
So come on, let's talk about it.
Well, I'm going to let
You don't want to talk about it? Okay.
I was gonna let her.
I'm happy to talk about it. I wanted Randy to be able to kick this off because this is a great opportunity for Austinites to invest in our public transit in a way that we never have before. I'll go back to the tipping point thing. I think there have been things on the ballot before, and I talked about previous cities, and I heard in Seattle when there was this $50-something billion bond. Many people thought it was only successful because they had reached that tipping point, and there were, stories of parents who were paying, for those with children still in childcare. Every minute that you're late to pick up your child is like $1, and so there were so many stories of families having to pay. This is just one anecdotal way that the congestion had gotten so bad there that they were having to pay hundreds more a month because they weren't able to get to their childcare facility in time, and they had reached that tipping point where they knew we got to do something, and our leaders are telling us that we have to, this is the way to do it, and this is the way to invest, and they approved that bond, and so I think we're there. I think one thing I often say is interesting in Austin politics is that it's unfortunate that it's all these progressives fighting progressives on these city type of issues, and so there's well, we want this kind of mode or we want this kind of mode when everybody agrees that we need to invest in public transit. It's just everybody wanting what they think is the best thing. And I think, and I hope that we are at a point now with a new Project Connect vision that shows we have to do something. We have to invest. We have to get dedicated pathways. We have to get cars out of bus lanes and just have, public transit having their own lane, because as you mentioned, the success on MoPac, and that's because we have buses out of traffic and just, I've seen video of, people just passing by traffic and returning emails and, and it's such a great success story that we're seeing on MoPac, and we can replicate that success throughout our city, but it's going to take an investment in a bond and in Project Connect.
All right, Randy, she teed you up.
It's hard to beat that.
How much money do you want, and what are you going to use it for?
I feel like with
Dr. Evil?
unlimited. No, but you know what? it's important that money is important, and we're going to have to be real. And I think, what's great about a town hall like this is, I think the average person out there knows the truth. To have things, you have to spend money. And that's personal or as public. And as a country, we're coming to the reckoning of our infrastructure, and this is all across America. So whether it's Seattle, and they did $54 billion, or Denver, which I think is a great peer example for us in Austin, has spent billions of dollars and kind of structured their city different, to Minneapolis and San Diego. We're like one of the last holdouts in the United States to do this. We might be one of literally the, if not the only one of the last couple to do this. So transit, I think the way we be clear on is, let's be outcome focused and not worry about the money yet. So the money is super important, but what are we trying to accomplish? And transit's number one thing is to connect a city together. And why are we trying to connect people? For opportunity. So that's better access to childcare, better access to education, better access to healthcare, jobs, economic opportunity. All of those things are what transit's about. And so we need that reliability, consistency. So again, we don't have to try to do something revolutionary. This has happened all over America, Canada, Europe, the rest of the world. We're going to learn from them, not worry about necessarily the types of tires that the vehicle's on. That's the last piece. What are we trying to do? How are we trying to connect the most amount of people? How do we try to get things built faster? Trying to get things to be as efficient and affordable for the future. Where our stations are, placemaking, how do we make people activity centers where they want to go, where they want to interact, and then the vehicle will get there. So there's no question real money will need to be spent. I don't want to get into that fear-mongering of it's $5 billion, $10 billion, $1 billion. I think that distracts from what the purpose is. This has to be the community's plan. Hit this point where we say enough is enough. We need more choices. And I'm not one of those people that's naive enough to say we're in Texas and everyone's out of the car. And we don't need that. But we need more people in less packages if we're going to have 4 million people live in this region and have a healthy, kind of good quality of life place that we want to all live in.
I hear you. I really do.
Yeah.
And we thank you, and we see the vision. But people are not able to afford their homes in Austin because their property taxes are so high. Gentrification is running rampant. We've got affordability issues. People want to know a number. So if there isn't a number yet, that's fair. But is there, so we are working towards, yes or no, a 2020 bond?
Well, again, ultimately, that won't be Cap Metro and certainly not Randy's decision. We'll be looking for our partners, and I think Delia's Mayor Pro Tem, I think the mayor, council members have been pretty open about, I think, towards the 2020 referendum to help as a partnership. We'll bring in lots of pieces on otherwise, it's not just on the city. So yes, we have to work towards that in the fall. We're doing a lot of analysis. We're working tons of community meetings. This is a commitment that we'll have more community engagement on this project than anything in the history of Central Texas. I guarantee that. I think we've already done an amazing job on that. So we'll get to that point. But we have to, I think, still focus on what we're trying to accomplish a little bit. There's going to be, I don't want people to also get hooked on a number that will also be maybe a total, but it's not just the local piece. So we look to get the federal contribution. And in some of these projects, that could be 50%. So let's say a project is, we raise $2 billion, that might mean the total program is $3 billion. So there's different ways to kind of get there. But I really do think people gotta still get behind the idea of what we're trying to accomplish. And you mentioned affordability, and I think this is lost on people a lot. Austin is becoming more expensive, and people use affordability and think about home prices or rent. The other side of the coin is transportation. Mm-hmm. So the two most expensive things everyone does are transportation and housing. So the reason some of our peer cities have invested in public transportation is, so instead of a family living in Austin and goes, I need 2 cars, maybe if we have a good public transportation system, you need 1. And so instead of spending $990 a month, a Cap Metro bus pass is $41. And that fundamentally, that's your kid's college education right there.
So basically what you're telling me is you're not going to give me a number.
Well, I think it'd be disingenuous for me to give a number on something we haven't done enough. I know you are enough engineering, but I do think it's important. We're going to get to a number, and I think it's pretty obvious. Representative Visual said we're going to need billions to make that transformational plan. We'll need billions. The question is, we don't need it all at once. What are we trying to accomplish? What's the most important part for the community? How do we work with our partners to get it done the best way and the most efficient way, and look for synergies, work for federal match, work with our friends at TxDOT? So I do feel good momentum working towards that. But again, I ask people not to get, I do a lot of running. You can't get to the finish line if you don't get to the start line. Mm-hmm. So let's not worry about the finish line yet. We've got a lot of work to do to get there.
All right, a lot of work to do to get there. You guys are sending us in a bunch of great questions, so we're going to throw it back over to Rebecca. Rebecca, what are some of the things people are asking?
Well, I got a question from Karen Long. She wants to know, this is for Randy Clark, any chance of rail expanding to Manor? A lot of people moving out there to Manor, Elgin, so she wants to know if there's going to be a rail line out there.
Yeah, so hi Karen, great question. So again, I'm not overly fixated on mode, but that one is the one that probably we could be the more specific on mode because we actually already own the infrastructure. So currently Cap Metro runs freight with our partner. We have a freight partner under contract, and it's a public-private partnership that actually brings operating revenue into our system to help fund part of our public transportation system. One of the only ones in the entire United States that does that. It's very unique, and it's a positive model. So we run that track today out to Manor. But part of the long-term conversation is about the Green Line, and how should we maybe work towards a Green Line from downtown. And so we're building a $35 million station downtown. Our friends at TxDOT have been helping with that. That will actually add the capacity needed if the Green Line gets built in the future, and that would go basically through the northeast to Manor. Part of that right now we're doing what's called a transit-oriented development study with the federal government to determine the types of land use that would be most complementary to having that type of high-capacity transit. And then we'd move into the engineering phase. So we're moving at all parts around the community on different lines, whether it's the orange line, the blue line, and that one there happens to be the green line, and that would be commuter rail because the tracks and infrastructure are already kind of aligned for that.
Perfect. Awesome. Another question here, this one's from Kristen Croft, and this one is for Mayor Pro Tem Delia Garza. Any conversations about offering incentives to get people out of their cars, whether that's tax breaks, discounts, anything like that that the city is going to offer to get people out of their cars?
I feel like this must be somebody who knows my latest resolution. Set me up for why. Thank you for that question. Yes, actually, I worked on a resolution to try to incentivize folks using the bus, and our city staff is working on that and seeing how we can do that. One of the ideas was if somebody could show that they had used the bus 15 times out of the month, could we give them a rebate on the utility bill? Could we give them some kind of, other cities have done things where with your bus pass, you can get discounts at retail shops or, places around the city. So that is, in fact, something we're trying to do, get people on the bus. I myself try to be an ambassador of Cap Metro and, on social media and saying, hey, I'm riding the bus today. But yes, those discussions are happening because I think there are so many people, my neighborhood, for example, specifically, since we've implemented Connections 2025, which is adding more high frequency on routes that we didn't have before, which has increased our ridership, I think most people just in my neighborhood, for example, don't realize that we live between two high frequency routes. You have the 801 on one side and the 10 on the other side. And so, Cap Metro's doing a great job of trying to inform people and educate people that we have a new system. But yes, we are working on ways to incentivize folks and seeing what the city can do. And again, specifically, it was, can we, give you $100 credit on your Austin energy utility bill if you can show that you've been using transit.
Maybe Ashley, if you don't mind, I'd love to add one little piece.
Sure.
I think it's really important. So one, I really do. Delia is a great leader, and she walks the talk, or rides the talk in this case. And I appreciate her, and really all members of the council and the mayor. I can't say enough about the partnership. We've had 4 joint work sessions in the last year between the Cap Metro board and the city council. And before I got here, I'm told that didn't happen on a regular basis. I really think there's alignment between the organization. City staff and our staff work together every day, and through a lot of these programs, we're doing a great thing. And the thing that I really want to highlight, what she and a couple of our council member colleagues that are on our board did, we worked with AISD and a lot of the PTAs, and we did a K-12 program where we offered free fares for all kids. So we used to have a fare, and it used to incentivize or disincentivize certain family trips and other things. We said, no, the right thing for this community is all kids are riding our system for free. And it's made a big difference to have access, affordability. It goes to equity. It goes to a lot of other concerns. And that was her and other members of the city help bring that all together. So I just wanted to really point that out, because that's the ultimate incentive, is how do we do things to really bring families and others to see that as a choice and not something I have to do. And I think our culture is now changing that way. And since June, we've redid our entire bus system, and we've been up ridership every month, and some months very significantly.
We've talked about MOPAC, we've mentioned 183, we haven't talked that much about I-35. Brian knows I'm coming to him. Can you tell us a little bit about the Mobility 35 Capital Express project? And there's construction right now on 35 through Austin. Maybe some people aren't familiar with what's going on right now. What's the future of I-35?
Well, so we're trying to figure out what the future is of 35. It's definitely this area's biggest challenge for us. It may be the state's biggest challenge for the Texas Department of Transportation to deliver 35 through Austin. We're looking at all options right now. We've partnered with the local metropolitan planning organization, and they've allocated some money for the project, and now we've just got to figure out how to fund the rest of it. It is a monumental undertaking to build additional capacity on 35 through Austin, mainly because of the constrained right-of-way. We've heard that a couple times. So we are working hard to figure out how to deliver that. We're looking at all options to fund that. And again, it's a partnership. We've talked a lot about partnerships, and to build any big project, it's going to take a partnership to work together and pool resources and build the project.
When we talk about big numbers, a number that we had recently that we heard was $7.5 billion in order to get 35, ideally where you guys would like it to be with that project.
Look, that's preliminary estimates. That's what we think. That's the magnitude or the order of magnitude that we're talking about, and so we've got to work hard to optimize what we're building, and then work together to figure out how to fund that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was talking earlier about tolling, and you said, well, we've already paid for it, and of course maintenance costs are really high, but the tolling would be variable, so it would be $0 most of the day. It would just be when there's congestion, and you're kind of effectively paying that cost that Mike talked about earlier that you're not recognizing, which is the delay that you're imposing on those behind you. And all that money goes into a pot and is redistributed, sorry RMA, but it goes back in the form of credits for travel. So everybody has this incentive then to maybe use their credits and not use those bottlenecks or those congested links at those times of day. And they can buy their transit passes, or maybe, they can buy their electric bikes if they don't want to own one outright. They can rent one. We've got a lot of that. And electric bikes are a really nice connection for a lot of distance trips. And they also can be put on the front of a Capital Metro vehicle many times, which is really nice, and they add a lot of flexibility to people's travel. So those would be terrific ways to improve, and I think going forward the technology is going to allow it with the GPS on board our vehicles, and then of course the self-driving vehicles is going to get us smaller buses hopefully, and we were hoping to have that demonstration project downtown with the self-driving 15-seaters, and that's going to mean less of a plug running through the roadway, because those buses are so big, because those drivers are expensive.
You guys talk a lot about changing and adding different modes of transportation, so this is just kind of an open question for you. We are in Texas, and people in Texas love their cars. They love their pickup trucks. What do you feel it's going to take to get people to change their minds and get out of those cars?
So it's choices. It keeps going back to the same word, right? So yes, it's warm here. I came from the Northeast. It's really hot here. But guess what? It's really hot in Phoenix, and they've spent almost $30 billion on public transportation. It's hot in Vegas. They're doing a bunch of public transportation. Dallas, Houston. So I mean, we're all in the South, and we all have the same car-loving concerns. It's not that we're trying to say no one can drive. If you're going to have a large city and be a healthy economy for the future, we have to have choices. And whether that means someone, we may not all use it, but we all need it. My analogy is like 911. I've never called 911 here, but I'm pretty sure I want a really good fire department, police department. And that's what transit's about. So you might not use transit to go to a UT football game 3 times a year. Your kid might use it every day, or your spouse may use it twice a week. We need to create more options, whether it's bike lanes, transit, fix our roadway capacity, add technology. We have to have a multi-lens solution to what we're going to do.
One of the things with questions and things we keep beating Austin up about is the single occupant vehicle. We are no different than Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, Atlanta, Phoenix, Denver. Denver has as many people doing SOVs as we do. It's not just an Austin problem. I mean, we had to go head to head with some other cities in terms of that being a metric, then we're going to win. We're at least going to push. There are cities like San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York that do have a different mode because they have fixed old systems that do carry a lot of people. But let me tell you, Austin is not that different than a lot of growing cities around the country. I think it's going to be driver behavior. I think we're going to have to incentivize. I like the question on incentivizing people. I think we're going to have to figure out, if we don't have to take but 8 to 10% demand off of our roads before we will see a very significant increase. And that includes transit, that includes driving off-peak, that includes work from home. There's a lot of things that we can do that will be less expensive, and couple that with other modes and other programs like Randy's talking about and what we're talking about. And I think we've got a roadmap for a solution. We've just got to put it all together.
All right, we want to give you all a moment to give us some final closing thoughts, about a minute each, because we're approaching that 8 o'clock hour. So just your final thoughts on this and the future of transportation throughout our region. Randy, we'll start with you.
Well, Maya, again, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed this. To me, we as a community have to get rallied around what the future is going to look like, and we can choose our destiny. We can have a destiny that is healthy, more connected, and works well for everyone. More choices, more equity, more affordability, as I mentioned. Or we know how bad it is today with congestion. So it's not going to get better with 30,000 people a year moving to the region. So we have our choice. The genie hasn't left the bottle yet. We still have a chance, I think, as a region to set our destiny and have an environment and a healthy city 20 years from now that we're all going to be like, wow, thank God we made those decisions. But I think the most important thing is get engaged now. There's big transportation plans going on online with all of our agencies. We need the community to get engaged and care about how this system will be put together for their future.
Well, we didn't talk about land use, and that really is a key piece of the puzzle. So getting that density up and doing what Minneapolis had the courage to do recently along right next to the part of the Twin Cities. They brought every single family parcel up to 3 dwelling units if you want. So if your home is really aging and that makes good sense for that location, a developer is probably going to be able to raise it and now reconstruct it, triple the density on that one parcel. And we really should have passed Code Next, and that was a real loss for this community. So I hope we get on that. Similarly, we do need more mixed uses, so people can have interesting places to scooter to, or electric bike to, or walk to, or bus to, so they don't feel like they have to get in their cars. So they really have to get away from that single-use, low-density land development that Texans have way too long favored. And Austin's been great about redeveloping the center, and now East Austin, of course, is pushing out low-income people, and so affordability is really important, and density across a large area helps with that. And then the credit-based congestion pricing idea I brought up earlier, super important, and that'll push people into ride sharing. And you can just use Waze Carpool. Just open your phone, guys. You can grab that app right now and open up seats in your vehicle, get paid 50 cents a mile, or be an angel and say, I'll do it for free, and just take people who are already headed from your approximate origin to your destination at about that same time of day. So these tools exist, but it does take a variety of mechanisms.
Right.
So I agree with most of my colleagues about it's going to take choices and alternatives, especially in our metropolitan areas. We're going to be focused on our Texas Clear Lanes initiative to solve congestion in our 5 biggest areas across the state, and essentially delivering on what the legislature has provided to us and is requiring us to do.
Mike?
Well, I would say incentivization. I think one of the things, if we could get people out of their cars at peak hour and to incentivize them, say, okay, for every time you ride a bus during peak hour, you get a credit towards the toll trip in the future that you have to take. That would be an interesting marriage. But I think what we're going to see in Austin is more managed lanes. There are several communities around the country, Atlanta, who is drowning in congestion, Minneapolis, Denver, who have said basically there's not going to be any more capacity that is not managed. It doesn't help the system.
All right. And Mayor Pro Tem Garza.
I really appreciate the comment about land development. That's key. And I think another important point is that this is not a siloed, transportation is not a siloed issue. And I think the city did a good job in providing policy direction for the next rewrite that hopefully will be successful to say that we have to include the ASMP, the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan. Those are connected. Those are very connected. How we decide our corridors is dependent on where we put the density, and we put those corridors where the density is, and we help with density. And political courage, you mentioned that early. It's political courage where people, we've not been wanting to grow. We've not been wanting to, and we cannot control. We have been so successful as this wonderful city, and we need to understand that people are coming, whether we like it or not. People are coming, and you know, to your statement about that this isn't an Austin problem, you're absolutely right. This isn't just an Austin problem. This is a nationwide problem. We're moving to a nation of renters, and we're moving to, you know, increase density in these cities. And so, you know, I think of it as a growing family. When you have a growing family, you have to make lifestyle changes to accommodate for that family. And I hope that our Austinites think of us, we're a growing family here in Austin, and we need to make these lifestyle changes to accommodate that.
All right, well, we certainly thank you all for joining us this evening. Obviously, we do not want this conversation to stop. You guys keep leaving those comments on their Facebook page, the story in KVUE.com, as well as on Twitter. Again, we thank our guests, and that is the end of our town hall. Have a good night.